Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Werewolf Apocalypse. Forest of the Heart, I believe it's called. Am I right? Yeah, Heart of the Forest. I'm sorry, Heart of the Forest. I get that backwards. So, we're going to hit from the town, we're going to go to the forest and take a look there. Because I had a clear goal in mind. My family was entangled with the town and the forest. I had to uncover my roots. Anya went with you. Indicates a change in Maya's current stats. Your character sheet may contain more details. Alright? Right. History pursue, right? People were scared of my family. They didn't want to... Right, so we're going to go to the forest. Into the woods. It was dark in the woods. Dark, humid, and chilly. The leaves didn't let through a lot of the sunlight. Danielle looked at Anya and me over her shoulder. How do you like her? We met maybe 20 minutes earlier. Bartek had told me Daniel was the best person to go to if I wanted to see the forest. So I found him, and now here we were. I wasn't sure whom he meant. Do you mean the forest? I asked. Polish was a strange language that gave the most unexpected genders to objects and ideas. I mean, puskaza. He gestured around. The word sounded like the wind rustling in the leaves. Oh, here it is. Pushcha. Pushcha. Oh, the pushcha. Okay, pushcha. Pushcha is the right word, not forest. Forests are like fields or orchids, cultivated. He spat as he said it. And pusha, she is older than even the concept of fields. He was using the word as though it was a name. So it's pushcha. Okay, so there and watch the forest. No, I looked at pushcha again. I looked around with fresh eyes. Inspiring. I felt as though I'd enter an ancient hall where warriors told their stories. The trees stretched towards the sky like columns holding up the vaulted canopy, which blocked out all but a few rays of sunlight. Gigantic, fallen trunks were decomposing slowly around me, with young plants and colorful mushrooms sprouting from them. I tried to guess their age. Some looked like they'd been there since before Europeans had sailed to the Americas. What stories could they tell? I love what I saw. It was alien. There was something unsettling about it. I love what I saw. There should be more places like this, I said earnestly. Or more of this place. Daniel lifted his head and looked me right in the eyes. Yes, you're right, he said with a serious expression. He was a strange guy. Slender but muscular. Not the CrossFit type. It was more the kind of strength you get from working all day long in the open. His skin was weather-beaten and bronzed by the sun, like tan leather, and he moved in a very deliberate way. But his fingers were slim and delicate, and his eyes were the strangest shade of yellow-green. Then I remembered why I was here. Perhaps he knew my family. I was cautious when I asked my questions. Yes. You look like you know all the local legends and folktales, I said. I didn't elaborate why I was interested in the topic. Daniel stopped abruptly and turned to me, watching me for a while. His nostrils flared as though he were tasting the air. I don't share them with strangers, he said, and then hesitated. But for some reason, Pusha doesn't think you're a stranger. Come on, he started walking. I know exactly what you need to see. That piqued my interest. Plus, another willpower. Awesome. So I was right. There was something hidden in my family's past, and it seemed to have a lot to do with the forest. With every step, I was getting closer to solving the mystery, so I followed him. All right. We have chose a path, he said. There's the old wolf den, or I could show you the barrows first, or a clearing that some folks call a place of power. So we'll do the barrows first. Just one small thing. We started walking, but after a few steps, he stopped abruptly like he remembered something. Then he turned to me. Could you do me a favor, please? He asked. Sure. Yeah, man, sure. What do you need? I smiled. He ran his hand through the moss on a dead trunk, smelled his fingers, and then reached in his pockets. He took out a small stone. Too small to be a weapon. Something personal? Inspiring. It looked like one of those stones you treasure as a child, and there grow out of. But he looked at the pebble as though it were still a treasure. I would like you to take this stone, he held out his hand towards me, and throw it in the direction you think we could go. I did what? I did what he asked. Okay, I said, reaching for the stone. I took the stone and closed my hand around it. Be careful, whispered Anya. It was just a stone. I was scared. It felt alive. It was warm, and I could feel it pulsating. I closed my eyes and thought about the barrows, trying to imagine that place. I smelled wet rock. It was cold. I was alone. I threw the stone. I felt my hand rising entirely on its own, and then throwing the stone as far as I could. It was a good throw. The stone flew in a long R over the bushes and disappeared without a trace in the dense growth. That doesn't sound right. Great, Daniel sighed. I was asking for that, wasn't I? What was the purpose of this? What happened next, exactly? Okay. Let's. I played it cool. He gave me a faint smile before he turned to head deeper into the forest. The dead hills. The trail soon disappeared. Sometimes we walked along a barely visible path made by some animals. Sometimes we followed a stream or a gully. But for most of our trek, we walked through the dense undergrowth. I was getting impatient. The sun was barely noticeable through the dense canopy. I had no idea which direction we were going, and I was starting to doubt if Daniel did. It was a pleasant walk. Pusha is sympathetic. It was a pleasant walk. There was always a path through the brambles, and the ground was even. The ground was even, and the branches stayed out of our way. I almost felt like the forest wanted us to find a way. Daniel's a mystery. I stubbornly pushed on. Brave. I settled into a steady rhythm and steadily pushed on, focused on my goal. I fixed my eyes on Daniel's back and slowly zoned out, which was not very smart. I came to my senses when I tripped and almost fell. Watch where you place my feet and follow me. Where I placed my feet, okay. We continued in silence. We'd been walking for a while when I noticed that Daniel's steps had become slower. He was also looking around more often and had hunched slightly. We were lost. Was it the barrels? I just enjoyed the moment. I sat down on a fallen tree trunk, looked around, and just enjoyed the afternoon. After a moment, Daniel shook his head. They're tricky and find sometimes, he mumbled. Be quiet for a minute, please. That was when I felt ash in my mouth, the smell of smoke and wet soil, and a pull. I knew where to go. I think I know where to go, I said, surprised. He tilted his head. Okay, let's check it out. I pointed to the barely visible path to my left, under a dying tree. He followed me, and I followed my feet, knowing exactly where they should go. Under the crooked tree, past the dead tree trunk, and the sponge-like mushrooms across the patch of wet, dark green moss, all the way to a place that didn't look much different than other parts of the forest, until you noticed the mounds. There was something about the flattened hills that drew my full attention. They must have been bigger in the past. I could remember. I felt dizzy. I could remember. A memory stirred in my mind. No, it wasn't a memory. It was a feeling anchored in my chest, akin to the taste of ash in my mouth and the smell of smoke. Longing, sadness, resignation. But there was more. A sense of sacredness. It filled me with calm excitement, and when I closed my eyes, I saw fire burning in the darkness. Voices. Inspiring. The dead were trapped beneath the stones, their bodies tangled in the roots. Some wore ancient Roman armor, some rags, some uniforms from the world wars, some modern camo. Their eyes were clogged with wet clay, but their mouths moved, repeating the stories of their lives. Will you tell them our stories? They asked. Will you remember us? No, their stories were boring. No, only one story was important. I had another mission. There was only one story worth telling, the story of the forest. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me. You were somewhere else, he said. You had the family here. I nodded. I heard that my father's family came from here. I nodded. I don't know much about them, though. He sighed. I don't think you should be here, he said tersely. You're not ready. He knew something. I didn't feel ready. Why? What do you know? I wasn't letting it go. About you? Not much, but I know the Pushja, The past is close here. His eyes were worried as he looked at me. And if the Pusha calls you to you, it's wise to listen. But it's not wise to get lost in the voices. Come. On the way back, I was lost in my thoughts. The voices in the vision knew what I had to do. It's almost as though it was expected of me. Plus, I discarded that thought. I quickly discarded that thought. The walk back was uneventful. So we did the barrows. So now, let's go to the wolf's den. The first thing I noticed when we stopped was a pine tree. A pine tree I knew. I remembered it. Small, twisted, crooked, and immensely powerful. Every bend of every branch had a story to tell. It's majestic, I thought suddenly. Months before that, when I had decided to come to Poland, I dreamed of that tree. I was sure of it, just like I was sure that under its roots I'd find a barrel, and a few feet away another one, like two dark eyes gazing at me as I approached. Daniel passed me and approached the tree. He pressed his cheek against the trunk. Hello? He said quietly. I said nothing. Was there someone there? He looked around, but we were the only people there, so I remained silent. A sudden gust of wind threw a cloud of dust in my face and into my eyes. This is a den, announced Daniel. It's abandoned, of course, but still worth seeing. Why was it abandoned? What happened? I asked. Humans happened, Daniel sighed. He sat under the tree, leaning his back against it. It was a hot spring morning when they found this den. No one knows who the men were, even though there was only one human generation ago. Only though it was one human generation ago. There were 6 cubs here under the roots of this tree. He stopped, stuttering, and seemed to enjoy telling his story. I enjoyed listening. And I enjoyed listening to it. There was something calming in his voice and the way he talked. His slow gestures and wistful eyes made me feel as though I was with the cubs on that hot spring morning. I don't think they wanted to hurt the wolves, he continued. They probably thought they'd been abandoned. That's why they took the cubs with them. Humans have this instinct that makes you try to befriend everything, especially if it's dangerous. Slave, I didn't disagree. Yeah, we were like that. Yeah, we were something like that, aren't we? I smiled. I'm not saying it always works out, but the intentions is good, and I believe the men who kidnapped the wolves wanted to do something kind, he continued. Anyway, they took them. Out of the 6, 2 lived to see the cold summer that year. The wolf mother used to come to the farm they were at and howl. People went gray if they heard her. I knew that howl. And suddenly, I heard that howl. I knew exactly how it sounded, and I felt despair and longing gnawing at my soul. I remembered how the cubs had reacted. They howled in response. The people, they whipped for a moment. They howled in response. Every time she came, we howled back through the closed door, letting her know we were still alive. There was hope that we would grow up to be strong. Maya, are you okay? Anya asked, putting her hand on my shoulder. It was nothing. I liked how he told the story. I felt for the cubs. I just feel for the cubs. I know a little about divided families myself. Oh, yeah, that usually ended the conversation. Daniel sighed, looking at the tree and the burrow. The cubs have survived, were sold to some people in Hinauka. But after a while, both of them ended up back in there with the scientists. They have a station in the national park. One of the wolves, Kazan, was a celebrity of sorts. If you saw any wolf photos from here, they were probably of Kazan. He was even on postcards. What is that? How do you say that? Kaynuvka. Oh, wow, you don't pronounce the H. Kaynuvka is a town near the forest of Orthodox faith and a notable center of Belarusian culture in Poland. One of the largest timber factories in Europe, and is located there. Okay, so it was a great story. They shouldn't have moved the cubs. I kept thinking about the mother. I wonder what happened to the mother. There's something missing from this story. I also felt like she was more important than the story made her out to be. What kind of wolf was she after all? That's a good observation. She eventually stopped looking for cubs. She came back to the forest and found new children. There was a slight gust of wind, and the tree cracked. I remember that sound from my dreams as well, a sound that made me feel safe. How often had they heard her share a story? Looking at Daniel's family, what happened to Kazan? And what happened later? I felt like I knew Daniel well enough to ask him that. Is Kazan still alive? He lived for 8 years in the park. Daniel looked at me with his yellow-green eyes. Until they let another male wolf into this pen. I held my breath. They fought over the she-wolf, and Kazan lost. Anya looked up from her phone. I've read about that. She sounded upset. They didn't notice he was wounded. It took him 3 days to die. Daniel shrugged. He lived long enough, a long life, and died fighting. It was good. We fell silent. He looked at the burrows for a long time. This place is my friend, so I try to keep it important and respected. I think it's my mission, you know? I can relate to that. I think I understand. Every family had a story worth remembering. Daniel looked at the tree one last time. Goodbye, he said. I also said my goodbye. Goodbye, I repeated, and we left. Now we're going to head to the place of power. A buzzing in my ears. It started with the hair on the back of my hand raising. The air around me seemed brighter, lighter. The leaves in the tree trunks turned yellow and my skin started to prickle. I realized that I couldn't hear anything except for a low buzzing that was filling my ears. I tripped and lost balance for a second, and when I caught myself, everything around me was swaying, dissolving into the buzzing. I had to do something. Snap out of it. I screamed. I willed it to stop. I tried to clean it. I willed it to stop. I frowned. Stop, I said under my breath sternly. And for a moment, the buzzing stopped, though I wasn't sure if it was because of my words or because I was distracted by a shadow among the trees. A few feet from me, there was a clearing. I could see the silhouette of a person moving slowly, deliberately here. I approached. The clearing was a plateau between huge boulders. There were double-trunked trees between the rocks and an angular wooden construction that stuck out of the ground like a sore thumb. There was a bike leaning on it. But more importantly, there was a man, and he was moving in the most beautiful, harmonious way I'd ever seen. It was hypnotizing. I couldn't stop looking at the way he moved, the way his muscles danced under the tan skin. I admired the precision, the certainty, the way the man carried himself. I wanted to have that. I wanted to be like him, and I knew I could. The energy that had been filling me earlier took form. It was flowing in rhythm with my steps, with the flow of his hands. The words came out of my mouth, seemingly without my knowing. What did he do? What was wrong with this place? What did he do? What did you do? He smiled. It's a little bit complicated. He stretched his hand toward me. I'm Cornell, he said, with a hand, German accent. Shouldn't you be on the logging site? Daniel asked him after I introduced myself. I needed to center myself, he answered. The others are still there. Don't worry. They were cutting down trees in the Singer Forest. Center himself? Here? How could you come here to center yourself? I asked, remembering the buzzing, the restless energy from moments before. This place is special, Daniel said. Some people call it a place of power, as I told you. And they have good reason to, Cornell added. Look around you. So I looked. It was a clearing filled with light. I could see Cornell's traces, a beautiful pattern on the ground, but there was one thing that caught my attention more than anything else. There we go. The tower spoiled the serenity of the scene. The boulders around me were strange. Fruit trees? I like that. The tower was... Yes. Why the F is this here? I asked pointedly to the observation tower. I thought this was supposed to be a forest untouched by humans. People believed this was a place of worship thousands of years ago. Hence the fruit trees, the stone circle, and now the tower. And indeed, there's a lot of energy in this place. You felt it, didn't you? Yeah. Yeah, I felt it, I said without enthusiasm. The Pushja is wounded and in pain, and it calls out in rage to anyone who can hear it. Here, the call is louder. You see, the logging, his eyes darkened, is a slaughter. Anya gasps quietly. Every priceless thing can be destroyed by greed. Logging is illegal, of course, but illegal is sometimes just a way of saying a bit more expensive but still profitable, especially for huge corporations. The forest is hurt. The wound is getting bigger, as is the desperation. Why doesn't anybody sabotage it? Why doesn't anyone know it? it was wrong. Yeah. Brave. I clenched my fist. Someone should sabotage the whole thing. You can't log without tools, and buying new tools will get unprofitable at some point. Cornell regarded me for a moment with a faint smile. You have a connection with the forest, don't you? You should come to the logging site and meet everyone. Absolutely, Anya said eagerly. It sounded good. It could be the next step, and even if it wasn't, something had to be effing done about the logging situation. Yeah, I'll come, I smiled. Great, you will understand what you need to do. He jumped suddenly and looked at the wooden tower and the bike I noticed earlier. I guess. It's getting restless, he said. And as Daniel pointed out, I should be on the logging site setting up the protest. Schwalbe, I think. What is Schwalbe? I asked, confused. He named his bike Swallow, Daniel explained. He loves it very much. Cornell grinned. Oh, I do. Nice meeting you, Naya. All I wanted to do was get out of there. The moment he disappeared, the buzzing came back. It wasn't as strong before, but it was there. All I wanted to do was get out of there. Alright, so we'll stop here. The next place we'll go is we will make our way back to town. So there you go. The story is continuing. We are learning about the forest, we're learning about the place, and hopefully a little bit of our history about our family. So thank you guys for watching and listening. I hope I'm not butchering this too much. And if you do like it, leave a follow, like, subscribe, do all those things to help me out. I really would appreciate it. I really enjoy this game, and it's really fun to, I guess, play, kind of narrate it. It's definitely different, that's for sure. So thanks again, guys, and I'll see you here on another episode of Werewolf, the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest. Bye-bye.